The sun beat down on the lush, manicured lawn as Karen stormed across the property line, her face flushed with outrage. She pointed an accusatory finger at Emily, who stood her ground, brow furrowed in defiance. "You're trespassing on my land," Karen shrieked, her voice shrill with self-righteous indignation. "This is my property, and I want you off it immediately." Emily's jaw tightened, her eyes narrowing as she regarded the irate woman before her. "I'm afraid you're mistaken, Karen. This is my land, and I have every right to be here." The tension crackled in the air as the two women squared off, their clash of wills palpable. Karen's lips curled into a sneer, her hands balling into fists at her sides. "Don't play games with me, Emily. I know this entire block belongs to me and my family. You're encroaching on our property, and I won't stand for it." Emily took a step forward, her expression unwavering. "Actually, Karen, you're the one who's mistaken. I own this entire block, including the land you claim as your own. I have the deeds to prove it." Karen's eyes widened, her confidence visibly shaken. "That can't be true. I've lived here for years, and this has always been our land." "Well, it's not anymore," Emily replied, her voice calm and measured. "I purchased the property last month, and the deeds are all in order. I'm afraid you're the one trespassing here, Karen." The realization dawned on Karen's face, her features contorting with a mix of shock and outrage. She opened her mouth to protest, but the words seemed to catch in her throat. Emily seized the opportunity, her tone hardening. "I suggest you return to your own property, Karen. If you continue to harass me on my land, I'll have no choice but to take legal action." Karen's face flushed with a renewed surge of anger, her eyes darting around the property as if searching for some way to regain the upper hand. But she found none, and with a frustrated huff, she turned on her heel and stormed back towards her own home, muttering curses under her breath. Emily watched her go, a sense of relief and satisfaction washing over her. She had anticipated this confrontation, having done her due diligence in researching the property records and ensuring her ownership was ironclad. But the sheer audacity of Karen's claims had still taken her by surprise. As the dust settled, Emily couldn't help but wonder what other surprises might be in store. After all, she had just become the new owner of an entire city block, and with that came a whole host of responsibilities and potential complications. But for now, she savored the victory, knowing that she had firmly established her claim to the land. The following day, Emily arrived at the property to find a small group of people gathered on the sidewalk, engaged in a heated discussion. As she approached, she recognized Karen, along with several of her neighbors, all of whom turned to face her with expressions of displeasure. "There she is, the trespasser," Karen announced, pointing an accusatory finger in Emily's direction. "I told you all she's encroaching on our land." Emily raised a hand, her voice calm and measured. "I'm afraid there's been a misunderstanding, Karen. This property belongs to me, and I have the legal documents to prove it." One of the neighbors, a middle-aged man with a graying beard, stepped forward. "That's not what we've been told, Ms. Emily. Karen has lived on this block for over a decade, and she's always been the one in charge around here." "Well, I'm afraid Karen has been mistaken," Emily replied. "I purchased this entire block of land last month, and the deeds are all in order. I'm the rightful owner, and I have every intention of maintaining my property as I see fit." The group erupted in a chorus of protests, with Karen leading the charge. "This is our neighborhood, and we won't stand for some outsider coming in and trying to dictate how we live," she shouted. Emily held up her hand, silencing the group. "I understand your concerns, but I'm afraid this is a matter of the law. I've done my research, and I can assure you that I am the rightful owner of this property. If you have any issues with that, I'd be happy to discuss them with you further, but I won't be bullied or intimidated." The neighbors exchanged uneasy glances, their expressions a mix of frustration and uncertainty. Karen, however, remained undeterred, her eyes narrowing as she stared Emily down. "This isn't over, Emily," she growled. "We're not going to let you waltz in here and take over our neighborhood. You'll see just how much trouble you're in for." With that, Karen turned and stormed off, the rest of the group reluctantly following in her wake. Emily watched them go, a sense of unease settling in the pit of her stomach. She had known that asserting her ownership would be met with resistance, but the sheer hostility of the confrontation had taken her by surprise. As she made her way back to her car, Emily couldn't help but wonder what other challenges might lie ahead. This was clearly more than just a simple property dispute. It was a battle for the very soul of the neighborhood, and Emily was determined to emerge victorious, no matter what it took. Over the next few days, Emily began to feel the full weight of Karen's wrath. Suspicious incidents started to plague the property, from freshly planted shrubs being uprooted to the sprinkler system malfunctioning at odd hours. Each time, Emily would trace the issues back to the neighboring properties, but she had no concrete proof of Karen's involvement. One morning, as Emily was about to head out for work, she discovered that the tires on her car had been slashed. Fury and frustration boiled within her as she surveyed the damage, her hands clenched into fists at her sides. "This has Karen written all over it," she muttered under her breath, quickly retrieving her phone to call the police. Within minutes, 2 officers arrived on the scene, their expressions solemn as Emily recounted the incident. They dutifully examined the tires and took down her statement, promising to investigate the matter thoroughly. "We'll do our best to get to the bottom of this, ma'am," the senior officer assured her. "In the meantime, I'd recommend keeping a close eye on your property and reporting any other suspicious activity immediately." Emily nodded, her jaw set with determination. "I'll be sure to do that, officer. And I can assure you, this won't be the last you hear from me about this." As the officers departed, Emily turned her attention to the damaged tires, her mind racing with possibilities. She knew that Karen was behind these acts of sabotage, but proving it would be no easy task. The woman was cunning and resourceful, and Emily couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of a much larger battle. Sighing heavily, Emily headed back inside, her thoughts consumed by the escalating conflict. She had to find a way to put a stop to Karen's harassment, but the path forward was not at all clear. All she knew was that she couldn't back down. Her pride and her sense of justice were at stake. As the day wore on, Emily continued to mull over her options, her determination hardening with each passing hour. She would not be intimidated or cowed by Karen's petty acts of revenge. This was her land, and she would defend it with every fiber of her being. The stage was set for a showdown, and Emily was more than ready to take on the challenge. The following week, Emily returned home to find a large handwritten sign posted on her front lawn, boldly proclaiming "Private PRPRTV." Neno TRESPASANG in bold letters. Beneath it, Karen's name was scrawled in an ostentatious cursive script, leaving no doubt as to the source of this unwelcome intrusion. Fuming with anger, Emily marched over to the sign and tore it down, her grip tight and her movements swift. She then strode over to the property line, where she could see Karen and a group of her neighbors gathered, their expressions a mix of defiance and self-satisfaction. "Karen," Emily called out, her voice sharp and commanding. "What is the meaning of this?" Karen stepped forward, a smug grin plastered across her face. "Why, Emily, I'm simply asserting my rights as the rightful owner of this property. That sign is a clear statement of our claim to this land, and I expect you to respect it." Emily's eyes narrowed, her hands clenching into fists at her sides. "You have no claim to this property, Karen. I've told you before, I am the legal owner, and I will not be intimidated by your petty attempts at trespassing." The group of neighbors murmured in agreement, their faces etched with a mixture of hostility and conviction. Karen raised a hand, silencing them with a gesture. "Oh, but we do have a claim, Emily," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. "You see, we've been caring for this land for years, long before you ever set foot here. We have a deep personal investment in this neighborhood, and we won't let some outsider come in and try to take it from us." Emily shook her head, her frustration mounting. "That's not how property ownership works, Karen. I have the legal documents to prove that this land belongs to me, and I have every right to do with it as I please." Karen's expression darkened, her eyes narrowing to slits. "We'll see about that, Emily. This neighborhood has its own set of rules, and we're not about to let you waltz in and start changing them." With that, Karen turned and stalked back towards her own home, the group of neighbors following in her wake. Emily watched them go, her heart pounding with a mixture of anger and trepidation. It was clear that Karen and her cohorts were not going to back down without a fight. This was no longer just a simple property dispute. It had escalated into a full-blown war for control of the neighborhood, and Emily knew that she would have to be prepared for whatever challenges lay ahead. Determined to assert her rightful ownership of the property, Emily decided to take her case to the local authorities. She gathered all of the relevant documentation, including the deeds and records of her purchase, and headed to the city hall. After waiting patiently in line, Emily finally found herself face to face with a stern-faced bureaucrat behind the counter. "How can I help you today?" the official asked, his tone brusque and impatient. Emily took a deep breath, then launched into her explanation. "I'm the owner of the property at 123 Main Street, and I'm having some issues with a neighboring homeowner who is claiming the land as her own. I was hoping you could help me resolve the situation." The official raised a single eyebrow, his expression skeptical. "And what exactly is the nature of this dispute?" Emily proceeded to recount the events of the past few weeks, detailing Karen's aggressive behavior, the property damage, and the illegal trespassing sign. She emphasized that she had the legal documentation to prove her ownership, and she was seeking the city's assistance in enforcing her rights. The official listened intently, his brow furrowing as Emily spoke. When she had finished, he leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled thoughtfully. "I see," he said. "This certainly sounds like a complicated situation. Unfortunately, without a court order, there's not much the city can do to intervene in a private property dispute." Emily's heart sank, her expression one of dismay. "But surely there must be something you can do. Karen is harassing me and damaging my property. Isn't that grounds for action?" The official shook his head, his tone regretful. "I'm afraid not. Unless there's evidence of a clear criminal act, this is a civil matter that will need to be resolved through the courts. My advice would be to consult with a lawyer and consider filing a lawsuit." Emily's shoulders slumped, her frustration palpable. "I was afraid you'd say that. All right. Thank you for your time." As she turned to leave, the official cleared his throat, drawing her attention back. "One more thing, Ms. Emily," he said. "I'd strongly suggest that you tread carefully in this matter. Neighborhood disputes like this can quickly escalate, and the last thing you want is to find yourself on the wrong side of the community." Emily nodded, her expression grim. "I understand. But I won't be bullied or intimidated. This is my property, and I'm prepared to do whatever it takes to defend it." With that, she turned and headed out the door, her mind already racing with her next steps. She knew that the battle with Karen was far from over, and she was determined to come out on top. Undeterred by the city officials' lack of support, Emily decided to take matters into her own hands. She knew that her only recourse was to pursue legal action, but she also recognized the need to gather as much evidence as possible to bolster her case. Over the next few days, Emily became a veritable surveillance expert, meticulously documenting every instance of Karen's harassment and trespassing. She set up hidden cameras on her property, carefully monitoring the comings and goings of her neighbors. She also began to keep a detailed log of all incidents, recording the dates, times, and any relevant details. As Emily pored over the footage and her notes, a pattern began to emerge. Karen and her cohorts were clearly orchestrating a coordinated campaign to undermine Emily's ownership of the property. From the sabotage of her car to the placement of the illegal trespassing sign, their actions were becoming increasingly brazen and vindictive. Determined to put a stop to this, Emily decided to take a more assertive approach. She reached out to a local law firm, enlisting the help of a seasoned real estate attorney who specialized in property disputes. "This is a classic case of neighborhood harassment and abuse of power," the lawyer, a sharp-witted woman named Sarah, explained. "Karen and her friends are trying to intimidate you into giving up your rightful claim to the property." Emily nodded, her expression grim. "That's exactly what I suspected, and I have the evidence to prove it." Sarah's eyes gleamed with a hint of triumph. "Excellent. That's exactly what we'll need to build a strong case against them. With the documentation you've gathered, we can file a lawsuit for trespassing, property damage, and harassment. And if we can prove that they're acting in bad faith, we may even be able to recover damages." Emily felt a surge of relief and determination. "I'm ready to do whatever it takes, Sarah. This is my property, and I won't let Karen and her cronies bully me out of it." Sarah smiled, her expression reassuring. "I'd admire your resolve, Emily. We're going to fight this thing tooth and nail, and I have a good feeling we're going to come out on top." With a renewed sense of purpose, Emily left the law office, her steps lighter and her mind filled with a newfound confidence. She knew that the battle ahead would be fierce, but she was more than ready to take it on. The tables had turned, and now it was Karen's turn to feel it heat. The following week, Emily and her attorney, Sarah, arrived at the local courthouse, ready to present their case against Karen and her group of neighbors. The tension in the air was palpable as they took their seats in the courtroom, their eyes scanning the room for any sign of their adversaries. Soon, Karen and her entourage filed in, their expressions a mix of defiance and unease. Emily could feel the weight of their glares upon her, but she refused to be intimidated. She sat tall, her chin lifted, her gaze unwavering. The judge, a stern-faced man with a commanding presence, called the court to order and listened intently as Sarah laid out the details of the case. She presented the evidence Emily had gathered, the surveillance footage, the log of incidents, and the documentation of Emily's rightful ownership of the property. As Sarah spoke, Karen and her neighbors fidgeted uncomfortably in their seats, their faces flushing with anger and disbelief. When it came time for them to present their side of the story, their arguments seemed hollow and unconvincing, riddled with inconsistencies and a lack of concrete evidence. The judge listened intently, his brow furrowing as he weighed the testimony and the evidence before him. Finally, he cleared his throat and delivered his ruling, his voice booming through the courtroom. "Having reviewed the facts presented here today, I find that the plaintiff, Emily, is the rightful owner of the property in question. The defendant's claims of ownership and trespassing are hereby dismissed, and they are ordered to cease all further harassment and interference with Emily's use and enjoyment of her land." A collective gasp rippled through the room as the judge's words sank in. Karen and her neighbors sat in stunned silence, their faces etched with a mixture of shock and defeat. Emily, on the other hand, felt a wave of triumph wash over her. She had stood her ground, refused to be intimidated, and now she had the full force of the law on her side. As she looked over at Karen, she couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction at the woman's defeated expression. "This is not over, Emily," Karen suddenly shouted, her voice shrill and desperate. "We'll appeal this decision, and we'll keep fighting until we take back what's rightfully ours." The judge banged his gavel, silencing the outburst. "I will not tolerate any further disruptions. This court has made its ruling, and it is final. If you continue to harass or interfere with the plaintiff, you will be held in contempt of court." With that, the proceedings were adjourned, and Emily and Sarah exited the courtroom, their steps lighter and their expressions triumphant. The battle had been won, but Emily knew that the war was far from over. In the weeks that followed the court victory, Emily found herself facing a new set of challenges. While Karen and her neighbors had been forced to back down from their direct confrontation, they had not given up the fight for control of the neighborhood. Emily began to notice subtle shifts in the community dynamics. Neighbors who had once been friendly and welcoming now greeted her with cool indifference or even outright hostility. The local businesses, once eager to cater to her as a new resident, suddenly became less accommodating, citing vague customer preferences as the reason for their changes in policy. It was clear that Karen and her allies were waging a campaign of passive-aggressive retaliation, using their social and economic influence to make Emily's life as difficult as possible. She found herself navigating a complex web of unspoken rules and unwritten codes that governed the neighborhood, a world she had never fully understood or appreciated before. Despite the mounting pressure, Emily refused to back down. She continued to assert her presence in the community, attending local events and making a conscious effort to engage with her neighbors. Slowly but surely, she began to win over some of the more reasonable residents, who were impressed by her determination and her willingness to listen and compromise. As the months passed, Emily's position in the neighborhood began to stabilize. While Karen and her cronies remained a constant thorn in her side, the majority of the community seemed to accept, if not fully embrace, her presence. Emily had proven herself to be a resilient and principled individual, and that had earned her a measure of respect, even from those who had initially opposed her. Looking back on the tumultuous journey, Emily couldn't help but feel a sense of pride and accomplishment. She had stood her ground, refused to be cowed by the petty machinations of her adversaries, and emerged victorious. The battle for the neighborhood had been hard fought, but in the end, she had emerged as the rightful owner of the property, her claim to the land firmly established. As she gazed out over the lush, well-tended grounds, Emily knew that this was just the beginning. The challenges of community integration and neighborhood politics would continue to test her, but she was ready to face them head-on. She had proven her mettle, and she was determined to make this property and this neighborhood her own.